Hey, everybody. Hey, guys. Welcome to Midwest House. Thanks, everybody, for being here on what is a beautiful day. As someone who lives in Texas, let me just say the weather is like this constantly. It never changes. So, welcome all. Today, though, we've got a really, really fun panel here today to talk to two real giants of what I think of as the Michigan success story. We've got Doug Song and Josh Luber. And today we're going to talk about what happens after you get that billion-dollar valuation for your company, which is something that we've seen with both of them. So to kind of kick off today's conversation, I was hoping to have both Doug and Josh just give like a quick kind of description because they didn't come out of nowhere. What did you start with, and how did you get to the point where you started your companies?
Hi, I'm Doug. So I'm a serial cybersecurity entrepreneur. It's the only thing I know how to do. For me, Duo was actually the third cybersecurity company that I was part of, second I started. And each time, progressively, learn a few more tricks. And so, at any rate, we can go into more of the details later, kind of what to expect when you're expecting and all that. But I would say that, typically an overnight success, well, maybe StockX is a better example.
Yeah.
Like sometimes overnight successes are actually like 10 years in the making. So I just encourage people to be patient. Right, it takes time to build a billion-dollar business.
Yeah.
We still had 15 years of grinding before StockX. So just as So I started about 5 companies before StockX. None of them are really worth talking about, other than the one that became StockX. So. But that's what happens. It is absolutely overnight success, 10 years in the making, where you're grinding and starting companies and learning, and eventually one becomes a little more successful than the others, and you keep going. I've now started 2 since then, so you just keep going closer. I got it.
Yeah, but
he gave me the mean look of holding it closer to my mouth.
Yeah, but the common thread here that I just want to focus on for a second is the fact that StockX and Duo were not your first gigs. They were not your first startups. And so can you talk for just a moment here about the ecosystem that you kind of came out of to kind of, then create the unicorn?
Yeah, in my case, there was a healthy cybersecurity community in Michigan before we started. Not even Duo or Arbor Networks, but before that. And again, that comes out of a long, long heritage that I don't think most people are aware of, right? In Michigan, there's just like in Silicon Valley, the history of tech, at least in Ann Arbor, came from the history of defense engineering. And so in 1946, there was a massive sort of investment in what was the first tank plant. And then we built the bomber, right, at Willow Run Airport in Ypsilanti. And what people don't know is what was on the backside of that. We built the first timeshare computing system, right, the Michigan Terminal System. We built the first state network, right, Merit Network. That led to the state of Michigan, IBM, and Merit getting the contract for the National Science Foundation Network, which connected hundreds of universities and research labs across the country versus the tens that were part of the ARPANET. So when people talk about the birthplace of the internet, and ARPANET and MIT and Stanford, it was actually Michigan that built the commercial backbone for the internet when NSFNet and ARPANET merged. So all that heritage is what led to us being able to do internet security, because all the people who built those companies are still there.
Yeah.
My story couldn't be any different. or less important, I think. Doug's literally protecting all of our computers from the worst things that can happen in the world, and we're selling sneakers and hats. So, but what year did you sell to Cisco?
2018.
18, right. So 2018 was the year that StockX blew up. It was actually started the holidays of 2017, and 2018 is when we went from unknown to known. And for me, I've started startups in Atlanta, New York, Philadelphia, and then Detroit. And for us to drop into that ecosystem with, we work with Dan Gilbert, and we're a part of that organization, but also to have Doug and Duo as an example of, and doing a lot of really good work for the ecosystem there. That's what every startup city needs. Every startup city needs that. It doesn't have to have, history dating back to 1946 of businesses, but that is very much a part of our success as well.
Yeah, something that, just to build a little bit more on this, part of the story of StockX is how, like after the long grind, how you got so big so fast. And you mentioned a name there, Dan Gilbert. Can you just expand a little bit on who he was and how he helped?
Yeah, well, so Dan is the probably most notable for being the founder and owner of Quicken Loans, which is now Rocket Mortgage, Cleveland Cavaliers, but pretty much the entire city of Detroit. And I had a small startup that I sold to Dan, and we became partners in turning that into StockX. But we had all the benefits of money, support, accounting, finance, legal. We got to drop into this organization that wasn't actually an incubator, but served for us like an incubator, where we just had to worry about just running the business, and we didn't have to worry about funding. I mean, having a billionaire as a co-founder is a nice gig if you can get it. So, but it wasn't just that, right? I mean, he was a legit co-founder, but it was all the other organizations and companies that were part of that. We leaned on the Cavs to do for marketing and awareness with the Cavs. We leaned on Genius and all the other businesses there. We had StockX branding in a Super Bowl commercial in 2017 because it was part of Quicken Loans. So there was a lot of benefit we got as being part of that. But Dan's main mission in life has been the revitalization of the city of Detroit, and we got to be part of that and not only benefit from it, but also try to help other people as well.
You guys also had Greg Schwartz, right, who came out of a history of startups, working in Detroit.
Yeah,
as well.
that's right. So Greg was my co-founder. It was Greg, Dan, and I. Obviously, Dan wasn't running it day to day. Greg and I were effectively co-CEOs, but Greg had run another small startup that was part of Detroit Venture Partners and Dan Gilbert's organization. That company did not work out, but Dan took that founding team and put them into this company and turned out to be a good fit. So, yeah.
More tactically, I have a similar story where, when we started Duo, it was actually in the aftermath of a startup that had failed. I was a VP of engineering, not a founder, of a company based in Zurich, Switzerland, but also half based in Ann Arbor, called Zatu, internet TV company competing against YouTube. We know how that went. And so that but what happened was, I'm going to say detritus, but in the aftermath of those kinds of, failed exits, right, you have lots of people and talent. So one of the things we did was we created what was called a tech brewery, just a co-working space for startups. And we had an amazing time hiring lots of other people from other companies, some founders, some not, but they would all recombine. And we'd all look for each other's lifeboats, right? Like when things got dicey. And so being part of a startup community where there are lots of people, because I tell you, the best hires you ever make are other folks who have been founders.
Oh, 100%. I would love to hire nothing but founders if I could, for sure.
Now, it's very clear that both of your startups they're almost like phoenixes rising from the ashes of other efforts, but you also had this community kind of help you grow. Once you've got this product market fit, once you're scaling, everything's hitting. Like, that's when, you now know, hey, there's really something here. What does that look like for you at that moment? Like, people are starting to throw money at you. People want you to expand like crazy. Like, if you could talk to yourself at that moment again, what would you tell yourself?
Well, we always had a kind of philosophy of trying to engineer our luck, right? Because basically, a lot of startup success is going to be in the right place, right time, with the right thing. But there is a strong element of like timing and luck to it.
Yeah.
But you can actually engineer that. You can make sure that you do all you can to be in the right place, right time, and have the right exposure. A large part of what our philosophy as a business was try to do better security by design, right? How can we actually apply sort of design thinking to the kind of problems we're solving? But that wasn't just a product. It was also, we used to say, we engineer the business. We think about what are the things that can actually build an inbound interest in our company, both from a customer perspective, but also from an employee perspective. And that's stuff I saw StockX do really well, where if you create a brand is just an external representation of those first two. You stand for something, folks will find you. And then putting that signal out, amplifying that in a way where the right people come to you for the right reasons because they recognize, they see you, right? What you're providing, they see you, and like, I want that, whether it's an employee or a customer. That's when you sort of create the flywheel, not the funnel. And so there's I tell people all the time, one of the highest leverage kind of opportunities for founders is things like PR or brand development. No one ever believes me. They're like, oh, that's, spend a lot of money on blue pens or whatever. But actually, putting what you represent and your voice and your mission out there is, I think, that's a shingle you hang out in a digital age.
Yeah, I don't know anything about finance, operations, technology, just brand and PR. That's it. Yeah. Once we got, it's true. Once we got that product market fit, once the business really started to hit, StockX grew 5x in 5 weeks in holidays of 2017. It feels so overwhelmingly chaotic, and all the stressors of, how do you handle this and all the problems. But someone pulled me aside and said, one, are you documenting all this? Like, document all these extraordinary things that are happening. And two, enjoy it. Like, this is going to be the most fun part. And man, I look back, that was by far the most fun part, is dealing with that. And it's all stress, and you have to work through it, and you have to solve the problems, just like anything else. But man, like, that year was by far the best year of my life of figuring out how to do all that. I wish I could recreate that. You can't.
Yeah, it's like lightning in a bottle. Like when the business really hits and things are kind of working as a flywheel. I mean, I went to visit him. Go check out. I was like, hey man, you're growing. Anything I can do to help? Because we were the first unicorn ahead of them. We're like, oh, I can help. I show up. He's got people sitting in the basketball court because they don't have enough room in their offices, right? I'm like, I can't help at all. Like, I don't know anything about this. This is crazy. I had like 600 people in 2 years. I'm like, I've never done that. That's nuts.
No, and you just deal with it, right? And you look back, and do you know how many people would like? I almost like cursed. My daughter's sitting in front of me. It's very good. Like, thanks, Fee. You know how many people complained about having to sit on the basketball court, or not getting seats at lunch, or what? And like, you look back on it and like, God, you trade anything for that. You trade anything for that amount of hyper growth and excitement and fun and all the things that were going on. And you look back and you're like, yeah, it was no big deal that you sat on the basketball court or didn't have a desk or whatever it was. It's fine.
It's like building an army. And I suspect, for every founder that, is building a company, even if you're not a hyper growth, but you're in early stages, do document. Like, get those family pictures, all that kind of stuff. Because that's the stuff that kind of propels you. It helps you build your story. And the story arc of your company and your organization, it's actually what you do as a CEO. You're a storyteller. You're always just kind of, what have we done, where we headed, and why. And so, the more time you take to be intentional about how you actually navigate that, the worst thing can happen is where it is just completely chaotic. No one knows what's going on. Mm-hmm. New people are hiring new people, and no one knows their job is. Like, that's the worst. And so you have to stay on top of it when you can. And so, it's like surfing. You catch the wave, but you got to stay ahead of it.
Yeah. Now, Doug, this was not your first rodeo. And at the time that Duo had achieved, call it that unicorn benchmark, you had a very specific idea in your mind in terms of what that outcome could look like. How did that influence some of your decision making?
Yeah, it's always easier to sometimes work backward from the goal. And so, founders these days, and although you can never really sort of connect the dots looking forward, right? It's always easier in retrospect, but I tell founders all the time, when you're building your company, maintain optionality. I see founders all the time get too far over their skis, right? Where they overraise. They raise these crazy valuations just because they can. And again, I know a lot of people would die for that situation, but there are things worse than death as a founder, right? And it's actually being a startup zombie where you've overraised with a post-money valuation that you cannot justify in 18 or 24 months by the time in which you got to raise again, or you need some sort of liquidity event. And again, if you succeed, that's great. But if you don't clear that typically 1x liquidation preference hurdle, right, to sell, you could work for many, many years, exit, and see your investors get a return, and you and your team get nothing. And people need to understand that kind of structure, and there's much worse these days in unicorn land that you see. You see a lot of structure on these crazy deals. Tiger guys have been kind of started that stuff, a little crazy, these massive deals. But it is, there are things worse than death, which are like 3x liquidation preferences.
I mean, this is a rabbit hole we could go deep, deep down, and we start telling horror stories. because there's plenty of those as well. I'll just say that for me, the outcome of all of that, or where I'm at now, I'm in the process of starting a new company. Thanks. We're not, no announcements, no announcements yet. The people that work there right now is a total of me, and that's it. And at some point in the very near future, I'll raise some money, I'll hire some people. But the number one goal, 100%, is maintain control. Like, that's it. If I have to take less money, if I have to grow slower, if I have to, whatever it is. And I'm fortunate to be in a situation to be able to do that, but it's because of those horror stories that are going down there. I mean, there's a lot of mistakes that we made and a lot of things that could have turned out better or we could have done differently. And by the way, it's not that we had the ability to make those decisions at those times, but it's hard to turn down money, or it's hard to turn down growth and to do that. And so anyway, this is like we're sitting on the tip of an iceberg going down like a deep story, but yeah.
I'll just point for one other thing. I mean, one of the things that helps keep founders out of trouble are their founders, right? Who've kind of seen seen those things before, like, hey, watch out, right? And so that's why we started the Mount Michigan Founders Fund. I'll put a plug in for Michigan Founders Fund. 80 founders plus, right? Who are all part of pledged to percent equity ownership or profits or carry of VCs. But again, these are all founders who are there to help, not to judge. Because you got plenty of that, right? As a founder, right? Yeah. And again, if you can get advice at the time you need it, that's something I would strongly recommend. Seek help where you need it.
Yeah. Josh, just to double click a little bit with you, not on structure and stuff like that, but on the bigger decision that you made, which was you hired a CEO for your company. Can you kind of talk us through that? Because, I mean, in my head, that seems like your mission, get the thing, and then you hired a CEO. Like walk us through that for a second.
Yeah, so, well, for those that don't know, so after, well, the topic of this is, unicorn status and billion-dollar valuation. So we did our unicorn round in early 19, and in the summer of 19, I replaced myself as CEO. And a year after that, I left the company. When we started the company, or when I was younger, I never in a million years thought that I would ever voluntarily hand over the reins. But after going through hypergrowth and after being around investors and understanding that the trajectory of this company was likely to either, go public, continue growing, and it did. I mean, we had a $1 billion valuation at that time. Back at the height of craziness 2 years ago, it hit an $8 billion valuation. So the growth was there. But what was really clear after going through all that was that I did not want to be a public company CEO. And like by that point, I understood myself and I understood where I wanted to be. And Greg and I actually go to Dan and convince him that to bring in a non-founder CEO. And we actually had our lead investor on the $1 billion round pull out and almost torpedo the entire round because I was stepping down. And it wasn't about me versus he was like, I support founders, I want founder-led companies. And we had all pulled back the whole deal. It was one of those like just out of a movie scenarios. I was on a plane to Tokyo, I had to turn around. I mean, it was crazy. The whole round was gonna fall apart. But we had to all sit down and convince him that one, this was my idea, this was Greg's idea, the founders were behind this and pushing this. And that this was the best thing for the company, understanding me, understanding who the new CEO was going to be. And did he make decisions that I didn't like? Absolutely. Like, were there things that I would have done? Absolutely. But man, I looked over there wasn't one thing that he was doing that I would have rather been doing. And it led to me spending time where I wanted to spend and then starting a new company and all the other things. So I'm glad that I did it, but it's still awkward. I mean, he did a big interview the other day on a big sneaker podcast, and I'm like, I wouldn't have said that, but that's fine.
But at some point as parents, right, you got to be proud when your children do graduate, right, and move on and everything else. And so I remember I was shocked when he did step down because, his shoe closet was on the elevators of the building, right? But it was like, the vision, the mission, like so much of the steez of that company was all you.
And yeah, but then at some point you're saying, well, this is how I can buy more shoes. He can make the company more valuable than I can, and and ultimately, right? Because look, at the end of the day, you do have to what's the best thing for the company, and as an equity owner of the company, it also ends up being the best thing for me as well. So it was good, but it still stings sometimes for sure.
Now, as you were going through that process, did you talk to like other co-founders about this? Did you have sounding boards? Like help us understand that.
A little bit, but it's a pretty, it's like for anyone that plays poker, there's never the exact same hand. There's never the exact same, run out. There are similar things. So it was very much about me and Greg, in the trenches together and figuring out. So we had each other to sort of work through it. But when we told the other early founders and other employees, they were all blown away. And we had to sit there and sort of walk them through that. But it was really about that. And I'll just sort of double click because I'm glad that you brought it up, Doug. By far, the most valuable part of StockX's success was my relationship with Greg, who is co-founder. And I didn't know him beforehand. We were perfectly complementary fit, personality, style, skill set, all that. And it could have gone the exact opposite way, right? So, I mean, like a business is just people. Like, that's it. And, yeah, I'm super fortunate to be able to have that. And so that's really where the value is at.
Yeah. Now, Doug, you had a very, you led all the way through. Can you kind of walk us through the decision to sell to Cisco and kind of how that plays out for you?
Yeah, well, I think we were on a hyper-growth trajectory, doing what we thought was, God's work, trying to make sure that we could protect every organization. But it takes time. It takes time to build all the infrastructure you need of enterprise sales, of channel, of international. And so, we saw when Cisco came at us, we were preparing to IPO. I also didn't necessarily want to be a public company CEO, but actually it wasn't necessarily sort of a personal decision for me. It was sort of more, what did Duo deserve in that sort of journey? And it didn't hurt that Cisco was offering what at the time was the largest multiple ever paid for private software acquisition. So that was sort of a thing to consider. And so when we look at it, it was the marriage of kind of what we did really well, Cisco didn't know how to do, and we could actually, that's why they're buying us. And what they had was going to take us years to develop, right? And so that was sort of the combination of security in a simple way at scale. And so that's what made sense. The experience was interesting though, because like you said, when it led all the way through, I mean, I was there 2 years longer than my co-founder who left about 2 years ago. The way I would describe an acquisition, for those of you who aren't, haven't been through it before, it's sort of like marrying off your children, but now you're living in the house with them. At some point, you got to leave that house. But you want to make sure things are good, and and so I went from being sort of like this racehorse, right? Like in a startup scene, you're racing, to going into a company of workhorses, right? Because Cisco is big, successful in the way that they've been. And the danger is you said, as a rocking horse, like back and forth between like two worlds where you're always trying to negotiate and navigate. And so you just have to prepare. Like if you're ever going to face a situation where you're going to be acquired, you have to prepare your team for it. And so anyway, if anyone ever gets in that situation, let me know, because there are many, many things that you can do to make that actually effective. And I see, from having seen how Cisco does it, there are lots of ways that people don't get this right. And your team always deserves better than that, right? So it's different when you bring in a leader, that's one thing. When you bring them into a whole other organization, like your whole world can literally turn upside down at once. And so you gotta actually plan for that.
Yeah, and now you're no longer at Cisco. Describe that first day where you didn't have a job to go to.
Very lost. I'm like, what do I do? So 6 months ago, I left Cisco, where I've been leading strategy and for the business, doing a bunch of investments, acquiring some companies. And to go from like 100 miles an hour to zero is actually a pretty tough transition. Actually, I don't know. John and I, my co-founder, we found an article written by a Yale professor called "The Entrepreneur's Epilogue," which I wish I had seen before, because it's really good. It's more about like the psychological journey, right, that the founder goes through of kind of giving up their child, right? And it's complicated. Yeah. It's very complicated, but at any rate, what was the question?
So describe that first day.
Yeah, the first day.
With no responsibility.
Yeah, well, it was basically doing more of what we were trying to, what I had been doing, right? So, outside of work, I'd always been sort of extracurricularly helping other founders, doing a little bit of investing here, there, and do a bunch of giving. And so we just worked to professionalize all that. We'd already hired Clea, who's I work for her now. She runs our foundation, our family foundation. We have, a bunch of other projects going on. And so So yeah, I've been in 9 countries in 6 months. I don't even know what time zone I'm in right now. But it's been fun and kind of process of exploration and a fun journey. But you've been busy too.
What I've had some version of that probably 4 times in the last 4 years. Right when I stepped down as CEO, when I left StockX, when I left Fanatics Collectible, when I sold Zero Cool to Fanatics Collectibles, when I left Fanatics Collectibles. So I'm getting better at it. I'm getting better at dealing with that. But it feels good, man. Like that first day when you wake up and you don't have to answer any emails and your email box goes from 1,000 to 0, and like it's pretty nice. And then you just go back to bed, and sleep for a while. But you very quickly find work, and all of a sudden you're working as many hours as you were before. But it's just it's different. For sure, the nicest thing about that, particularly in a post-COVID world, is being able to completely time shift your life to be with your family or whatever else you want to do. So that's great too. But yeah, it's an abrupt stop and.
But it seems like you're a glutton at it because you have another startup.
Yeah. No, there's no way I'm gonna not do something. I mean, I can't wait to get back on the horse and get back to the speed, right? And as I mentioned, a business is just people, and the most beneficial part of the last 3 runs has been, I feel like my whole life has been a search for co-founders and a search for people I would hire. And I have 50 people that I would hire in a heartbeat for certain roles. And I know exactly who the first 6 or 7 hires are going to be at the new company as soon as we raise some money. I know exactly who I'd hire for a couple others. And that's the best, right? You get those people that you know and can jive with and work. And I'm just excited to start working with those people.
I'm not a sports guy, but for me, I'm a skateboarder. But like business is my team sport, right? That's the best. You bring a bunch of people together, you go for it. But it is like skateboarding, right? Sort of like you 80% of skateboarding is fall on your face until you figure out how to do the trick, and then you try to learn another one. And like, why would you do that? Like just pain until you figure it out. But actually, it's fun. It's like so I don't know. I'm not going to say I'm not going to do a company again, but
yeah. I mean, very selfishly, as someone who goes to Ann Arbor to invest in companies, it's like, especially with you, Doug, it's like, I don't know if I can meet a company in which either you or John O is like not somehow involved. How does that happen?
There's a lot more. There's a lot more in Ann Arbor than what we're doing.
Well, in a very specific security setting, yes.
Yeah. No, I mean, hopefully you have the virtuous cycle of founders who had some success, making sure that many other people can achieve the same, right? And that's what makes a community, right? And so I think that's incumbent on all of us. No matter what stage your business is at, if you figure something out, help someone out. There's always something that you can teach, and always something that someone that needs it.
Yeah. I mean, it just seems like if I were to tell your stories again, it's almost like both StockX and Duo are just chapters in this never-ending saga of startup after startup after startup, in which you guys are just chasing that thrill again.
Like there's a Buddhist concept like samsara, like the cycle of suffering. I mean, it's life, man.
It's what we are, right? It's what we do. And I mean, I thought about it for a day, 2 days, 3 days of like, what if I like retire? What would I? Oh my God, I almost like kill myself. Like I'm way too young. There's way too much stuff to do. It's way too much fun to do that stuff. Yeah.
We tried. I mean, I remember seeing a former founder. I took my family. We're in Hawaii for 2 months, and we're like, we've surfed all the right beaches, we've skated all the skate parks, like we've eaten all the restaurants. Like, let's go home. And I remember when I first met a founder in Ann Arbor, Matt Toshlag, very successful gaming founder, right? 18 years old. He started Descent, first 360 kind of first-person shooter. Yeah. Anyway, he was a very successful founder. After one of his exits, he took the company to Hawaii, and they came back. I was like, why would you come back from Hawaii? He's like, you'll figure it out.
So of the 50 folks that you already have on your hit list for your next startup, Josh, how many of them are getting back involved again? Like, is this really about bringing the band back together, or how does it work?
Oh, yeah. I mean, some of them are already actively working with me in their day jobs, not to sort of out them as they do that. But Yeah, I mean, once you find people that jive in a certain way, I mean, that's what, like, particularly when a company's so small and it matters so much at that scale.
Yeah.
The difficult part, though, is now in a post-COVID world, well, I can hire them all wherever they're at, but I'm not going to get them all back together, actually, in the same way, right? I mean, we had that benefit. I mean, Doug was joking, who hires 600 people in a year, but, like, I spent my entire life for 2 years just trying to convince people to move to Detroit, because there was no hiring people if they weren't moving to Detroit to be part of it. And, you don't have to do that anymore. Yeah. The counter is I get to work with all those great people, but you don't have the benefit of those people together. So,
yeah. By the way, what's it called? If you guys have questions, we've got a mic circulating somewhere if folks want to ask anything. Otherwise, we're just going to keep on riffing back and forth here.
I think we had a question over there.
Yeah, over here.
You can shout
Yeah,
out.
just scream at us.
I didn't see you over there, so
Check.
we wouldn't have called on you.
Oh, there it is. There it is. You got a mic now.
It's kind of, just exactly what you just said. I mean, my job is to bring people to live in Detroit. And so, I know, Doug, you're passionate about kind of the ecosystem in Michigan as well. And as we shift to this remote economy, you also have to have the density of mindset and talent in one location. So what are 2 to 3 things that Detroit is lacking, or that Michigan's lacking, or the Midwest is lacking, that the public and private sector could come together to make sure that we really can create kind of that ecosystem where people want to live and you don't have to sell it to them? And how do we get the second startup back in Detroit?
Well, look, it is. Sorry, is this on? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a fair question to ask that, but it's not actually that anymore, right? For years it was, what is Detroit lacking and what is Dan going to do to change that? But now it's just a function of people don't have to move. And, I know I'm never going to get the people that I want to work on this next company with me to move to any city. Doesn't matter what they are. Some live in New York, one guy lives in Utah, one guy lives in Miami. Like, it's just not going to happen because people don't have to do that. And I think that, I don't know if you were here at the very beginning, but that is the difference with the growth of Detroit now versus pre-COVID, is you just don't have to move anymore, and people have that benefit. And I think it sucks for Detroit because it was on a trajectory to do that, but I can hire all those great people now and have it. So
One thing I don't think we're missing, but we need a lot more of, right, are stories that capture a lot of what is happening, because there's so much goodness that happens. A lot of what gets covered is sort of the negative stuff. And so, I tell people all the time, like, there's so much amazing stuff that happens in Michigan, but it gets almost no ink. I mean, literally, like, we had a company, Ypsilanti, raise a $30 million A round for a company called Luxwall doing net zero glass, right? So the previous panel, like, these guys have made a glass that's basically transparent insulation, so you can build buildings differently now, because 50% of your energy is not escaping your windows. But no one wrote about it. Like, literally, there wasn't a single press article about it. There's something wrong. Like, we have to fix that. That's a problem I think we got to figure out.
One thing that I'll say, although I probably have the least important opinion on this stage, is that I think that remote work has actually been a boon to a lot of these ecosystems, in Detroit in particular, because it used to be a binary choice. You used to have to be able to get the whole team together in one spot, or you'd have to pick a completely different spot. And now we have this amazing luxury where now it's like, hey, we got like one person who wants to like work remote. Great. We have 2. Great. We can get the best player we can for those folks who are not proximal to us. And now it's no longer a this or that. It's a let's get the right concentration in the right spot.
Yeah, but the flip side of that is, you're never going to see, what did we hire? 1,400 people in 3 years? You're never going to see that happen in any city, let alone Detroit. Yeah. It's just not necessary. So,
True.
Hi, thank you all so much for being here. I had 2 questions for you. One is, what advice would you have given yourself now that, like, when you were first starting your companies that you know now? And also, what was the best piece of advice that you ever received as you were building your company?
Who wants to take it? Go.
Doug's looking down, so I guess that means that I'm supposed to start. Well, I think they're similar. I'm fortunate to get asked this question in a lot of different ways, and I think I always say the same two things, both of which are extremely sort of basic, right? One is talk to everybody. Ideas are worthless. Execution is the only thing that matters. And there's so many founders, particularly young founders, that think that their idea, someone's going to steal their idea, or they need to be super secret and private. Like, talking to everybody is how you find founders and co-founders and employees and investors and business partners and refine those ideas. So talk to everybody about everything. And then second, which is even more basic, and I hesitate to use the sort of cliche of Nike, but like, just do something. Right, you have to just do something to push it forward, even if it's nominal, even if it seems like it's menial. I spent 18 months where all I did was clean Excel data. That was it. It was just me in an Excel spreadsheets for 18 months, and it felt like, what am I doing? Like, why am I? But what was I going to do? Was I going to like watch TV or like just doing something to move it forward, to put yourself in this position for something else to happen? So, like I said, talk to everybody and just do something, which is pretty basic, but like, that's kind of the 1-2 to just, to move forward.
Just before Doug chimes in, were there any iterations to the StockX business model that came out of those conversations? Was there like a big one that you want to talk about?
Oh, I'll tell you the biggest one, right? Which is that, so the short version of a longer story is that Dan Gilbert and I had the exact same idea independently. I had never met him, I'd never been to Detroit. But when we sat down, the big level idea was the same, but my plan was to actually build a stock market simulation as a way to essentially teach people how to use the stock market, almost like a gamified version of a game, and then roll that into a marketplace. And then those guys said, no, why don't we just build a marketplace? Like, what do you need to do all this other stuff for? And so like, and it was more complicated than that, but that was the basics. And I mean, I don't know if we ever would have gotten there, right? We could have gone down another path. We could have ended up as a video game company, like, who knows? But like, those guys were very focused on the marketplace aspect, and that's where we ended up.
What about you, Doug? Any big iterations that came out?
Yeah, well, for me, the three security, because I had 3 security companies, so I could have done one if I got it right the first time. But but that's basically the idea, right? So between like basically the second and the third, one piece of advice, one thing that I focused on with my co-founder and later my CFO as I brought him on board was, we're only going to work with people we want to work with. We're not going to compromise, right? Character and competence. So many people say, well, yeah, they're a jerk, but they're really good at this thing. And we just decided, like, we're never going to do that again, because that turned out horrible, right? And again, that's a lesson hard learned, but I strongly encourage you, right? If you can possibly help it, only work with the people you want to work with. Just tech fundamentally is a people business. That's all you've got. You don't have factories or machinery or material. Like, you just have people, and it's how they work together that determines whether you're successful or not. And so again, we weren't better, resourced, smarter, worked harder than anybody else.
1,000%, like 1,000%, I agree. And like, we absolutely compromised, and I've compromised more times than I would have liked to, and some of them have completely bit me in the ass. And that is the goal of now, and that's the point of having 50 people I knew who I'd work with. It's like, that's who you want to work with, absolutely.
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah, another way to one other point is, don't interpret that the way that sometimes people do, is like, we only hire A players. I hear that stuff all the time. We only hire A players, right? Like, what is an A player anyway? Right? Is that they're not a jerk? Is that whatever? So, but work with the people you want to work with, which might include people that you see the potential for, that you want to share and see them grow on that journey. Because for many of us, like a duo at least, all of us were doing our jobs the first time. First time CEO, first time CTO, all this, right? Down the line. And you know what? That was the beauty of it. We had an amazing time learning together how to build something really special and unique. And we didn't say, oh, we got to find someone who's like knows everything that we don't. We were just trying to find people who again had something to contribute.
I had a guy who I brought with me to Fanatics Collectibles, who everybody tried to fire like 4 times. Every time budgets came up, and I'm like, we're not firing him. I know that he doesn't do any of these things well. I was like, but he does this one thing. He works really well with me on this one thing, and we're keeping him for that thing. So, and then I left and he got fired. But that's it. Yeah.
Doug, you have a saying sometimes when companies are growing too fast or hiring too fast. You say new hiring new. Can you share that with this group?
Yeah, Yeah, it's a sickness of hypergrowth. I mean, we just saw the correction for it, right, in big tech, where like people fired like thousands of people and nothing happened to those businesses. I mean, there is such a thing as, again, getting too far over your skis, and but the danger of new people hiring new people is that literally they don't know what their jobs are. And again, it depends on the culture. Sometimes you're able to push decision making down in such a way that people are empowered to figure that out, right, and do so. But they still need some sort of scaffolding, right, for human, kind of organizations. And so that's the danger, right? Like if you don't have intentionality about your organizational design, about the culture, about your management system, how you want people to actually lead and develop and enable other people, then things can go really sideways, like Uber.
No, I mean, that's why, and this is a very long conversation, right? But that's why it's important to have a company culture, to articulate it, to document it, to make sure that everybody understands it. There's 0 people that work at this company besides me, but like we have a fully documented culture, right? And so whoever the first employee is going to have to, read it and send it to everyone else. But like that's how you do that and go through, because when you do get to that place and you're hiring, hundreds of people a week, you can't be in the room with everyone to talk to them about it. So
even at 800 people, I was still doing onboarding for every employee. I mean, granted, they were in hiring classes, so like 40 people, but we have to teach what you want to happen. So we spent all that time to do that.
Yeah. So was I, absolutely.
There's a question over here.
Hi, thank you all for your comments, really insightful. My name is Darcy. I work in marketing for a financial advisory firm, and we work with founders after they've experienced a liquidity event. And I'm curious if you're willing to share any financial lessons learned after going through an exit.
Did anyone put all their money at SVB?
I was going to say, be careful how much Bitcoin you buy, but.
Well, there's a related thing. I think I've seen a lot of founders. I know a lot of other founders who've exited prior to me, and the ones who got too busy too quickly in things that, without really sort of, they were restless, and so without a job, their job was sort of doing stupid things faster with their money, and so take the time to sort of understand what's going on and everything else. I think the other thing is work to structure your philanthropy, right? Like something we were intent on doing from the start, and so we had a lot of help, right, to go and do that, set up a foundation, all the rest. And so that was, at least for us, something that was really important because we needed professional help, right, to go do it. It's clear there. If anyone needs money and you're a nonprofit and you're in Southeast Michigan, let her know.
Now, do you guys angel invest today?
Yep.
And describe kind of your, like as you think about angel investing today, like, post unicorn status, help me understand the motivation there. Is it financial return? Is it giving back to the community? Is it just getting the high off of the entrepreneur? Like walk us through the decision to, because it's really easy to just put your money in an index fund and forget. But you guys are pretty active. So walk us through that.
Well, so for me, it's sort of like, again, like I said, I think money doesn't really change people too much. Sometimes it does, but for the most part, it just makes you more of what you're already doing. So the way I'd encourage you to think about it is like if you found like a $10 bill on the ground, and someone later comes and asks you off the street, hey, can I have $5? Like, what would you do? and so for a lot of us, it just depends, right? It's like a very personal decision, kind of how you choose to do that kind of thing. For me, angel investing is really about just helping other people get the chance that they should have, right, to do something new. And it's not, it's betting the jockey, not the horse. So usually there's no financials, there's no metrics, there's barely even really a business model. Usually it's just kind of like 2 people and a talking duck. Is usually like the most I see in a company that early. And so that's usually it, but it's basically my grounding. It's like, is this person who needs the help, number one. 2, is something that I can actually help with. Because otherwise, there are a lot of other better angels sometimes, right? And I encourage also you to think about from the start, get people around you who actually can be helpful. Because the color of money, at least in this country, is all just green. So find people who can actually do more than just give you money, but actually help in some way. And we'll do it in the right way, right? Where they won't be backseat drivers, they won't be second guessing all the time, they won't be judging you. They'll just be showing them, like, how can I help? And you put them to work, and they do it.
Yeah, I haven't been nearly as active in angel investing as I maybe thought I would be. And partly it's because I can keep starting companies. I've started 3 companies since I left StockX, but the only companies I have invested in are ones where I knew the founder personally, or the founder was vigilant in reaching out to me and push, and I finally said, okay, I'll take the meeting. Okay, and there's one that came out of that where, I mean, like, I love the kid. You know, he's brilliant. Like, he's got all the passion in the world, all the hustle in the world, and like, that's why I want to help, right? I want to help people that, and it's in a lane that I know enough about that I can actually help them. But like, that's it for now, right? My time is the companies I'm starting and my family. And I feel like if you're going to actually be an angel investor, and I had a long conversation with 2 of our board members at StockX about this. You know, if I'm going to do that, I want to be able to help them. I want to actually like be involved and not just put in a check. So I'm sort of holding back on most of it, but you know, there's a couple that I've done.
Good afternoon. My name is Farai Gundan, and I'm working on a fintech startup out of Michigan. So thank you so much for this instructive conversation. This is a recycled question from earlier on. Actually, Caleb asked it, and it was co-founding or not to co-found, especially for first-time founders. So would you push for a co-founder? And then I had a chance to speak to Sergio, and we were talking about, if you do have a co-founder, what should that structure look like? Is it 50-50? Is it 60-40? And then why? I'm interested in the rationale behind that founding structure that you would have with your co-founder. Thank you.
Well, I'll do the quick version on what else you have to say. So 1,000% that if you have the right person, you should have a co-founder. You need help. There's so much to do. But my co-founder at StockX was amazing, and basically all the reason for the success is our relationship. I had a co-founder at a company after that didn't go as well, and part of the reason that I left was because of that. And now I'm starting another company, and I don't have a co-founder, and it's only because I haven't identified the right person for it. But man, I would give anything to have the right person next to me, you know, running this. The financial question and the split is a much different thing, and I mean, it depends. I mean, there's a million different ways you can cut it for a million different reasons. But you know, fundamentally, if you're there and it's just the 2 of you and there's nothing else and there's no money and you're there at the same time, I mean, you're basically on even terms. So it's a question of, there's only really 2 ways you get equity in a company, right? It's money and time. So yeah.
So that's great. I think personally, I think there's the answer given earlier in the early session. Well, like if you're lost in the woods, would you rather be by yourself or someone else with you, right? And so I think that's true in so many ways, because it's hard, right? The journey of a startup founder, every day is either the best day or the worst of your life. And so you need someone to be up when you're down.
Yeah. Now, at the risk of poking the bear on this, has the co-founder share split since you guys have been successful for your next startup?
Sorry, what's the question?
So if you previously were splitting with your co-founders 50-50, now that you guys have been successful and you've had your unicorns, now that for your next startup, do you think about the equation very differently, or is it the same?
Well, I'm not necessarily doing a startup, but I think there's, in any partnership, you know, especially in a commercial partnership where, you know, again, you're trying to build a business. It just, again, like you said, it just depends on the nature of what each partner is contributing. And so, but the most important thing is commensurate with what the future is, not what the present is. There's a present for what is important now and today, but you got to think about what you're going to go into. And so I think a lot of folks, I see a lot of particularly academic teams come out like, we have 5 co-founders, and like, you are host, right? That's the problem. The most dilution you ever take is from a co-founder. Yep. So when you see founding teams where like there's like 2 people doing all the work and someone's like a dead weight, you're like, okay, that's a recap. That's something you got to fix, and that's painful.
Yeah, I would say it's either 2 or 3. And I do think today the equation would be slightly different, but that's because I'm doing this on my own right now. If and when I find the person that I think is right to be alongside with me, it'll be a function of who that person is and what they're doing, right? I mean, if it was Doug joining me tomorrow, I think it'd be a pretty even thing just knowing what he would bring to it, given the history and the fact that I've only been doing this by myself for about 3 months. If it's a year from now and it's somebody that's 26 that's, you know, co-founded one other company, and that's just a much different conversation. Yeah.
If we're doing cybersecurity, I'm going to get more.
No doubt, no doubt.
Yeah.
So my question is, did you guys, before starting your companies, did you desire to be in the limelight and be doing podcasts and interviews and having people write articles about you? Or did you feel like it became necessary to be that person that has to be on in the stage and talking everything that needs to be said?
I had zero desire to ever be in the public eye. It's always very uncomfortable for me. I think, like I said, most Americans actually would rather be the person in the casket than the one delivering the eulogy. It's public speaking is unnatural and weird. I mean, that's why there's media training, all this kind of stuff, right? I guess what I'd say is you have to do it. Right? If you're a founder, it's more than just you. You're representing your business, your company, it's your team, and so you have to develop those skills. The founder journey is one of personal development. I don't think people realize just how much pressure that is, but it is one of developing as a leader. And so if you're uncomfortable with that, like probably you all are, like I am still, you have to practice. You only get what you practice, and so find help. Practice it, do it. It'll get more comfortable and easy, and sometimes you won't even think about it because it'll just be like, water over a bridge. Like you're just repeating stuff, and I don't know what I'm saying, but I'm giving the same answers I always do, and it's like you become a robot.
I definitely didn't seek it out. I never thought that my life would become what it did, but because of StockX, the nature of it, how fast it grew, the fact that it was sneakers, the fact that we had NBA and famous people involved, I found that I was traveling all over the world, getting to speak in all these places, and then I was good at it and I enjoyed it, and then I did spend time, working on it, and I actually for a moment in between two startups considered becoming a professional public speaker, just because I enjoyed it and was doing it. So, but I don't know, if I had started a cybersecurity company, maybe I never would have been on stage talking about it. So, yeah.
Well, hey guys, we're running short on time, and so I just want to say thank you very much to both of our panelists here. I want to say thanks to Midwest House for hosting this, and a big kudos to Michigan Founders Fund for helping with all the logistics and figuring things out. So thank you all for your time.